Hello everybody, it is April 1st, April Fool's Day. God damn it, I forgot to prepare a funny joke, but it's a new month and I'll show you my recap. I managed to read 9 books this month, believe it or not. Look at all these tabs, that looks cool, eh? I think I only achieved this because I did not have uni classes for the whole month. I was on semester break. And also the holiday I was gonna go on was cancelled, so I just stayed at home reading a ton of books. And that it's quite an impressive stack, I would say, for my standards. So let's go through all of them. Some of these, it seems like so long ago that I barely even remember these. The first book I read was Sputnik Sweetheart by Murakami. Murakami has kind of his own set of tropes and these reoccurring themes and characters and stuff like that in all of his novels. And he has this trope of like this I would call it like guiding woman or something. It's like this female character who's very mysterious and very you don't really get to know a lot about her, and she kind of has like some knowledge, and she's usually a sexual interest. Yeah, and she kind of has like a guiding role of kind of, you know, meeting up with the characters and telling them something that they need to know. And this is kind of that trope explored. It's in a ton of his books. And it is it has definitely some romance elements. It's famously his, well, I don't know if it's really famously, but it's a lesbian love story, which Murakami is being critiqued for writing really shitty female characters. So if you're someone who has that criticism, read this book and tell me what you think, if they are well written or not. I like this book. I think it was one of his better ones, and he definitely, you know, I'm reading all of his books in chronological order, and you can see how he progresses as a writer. So that's quite cool to do that for an author. I can really recommend that. If you really like an author, reading their works in chronological order, that really shows you how they have progressed. And I ended up really liking the ending. You could argue that it feels a bit lazy, but yeah, man, I just like these Murakami books because usually not a whole lot of plot happens there, and it's written in a way where it's still really enjoyable. So, yeah, that's that. Next up, I finished Post-Scarcity Anarchism by Murray Bookchin, which took me a long time to read. I don't remember exactly how long, but I think I started it like really early on this year. And I have to admit that this went very much over my head. I'm very interested in the concept of anarchism and anarchy in a political and societal, economical context, especially in times like these. But I don't think this is a good place to start reading about it, because this requires a ton of prior knowledge and, but also this was published. Originally, these were in like anarchism magazines, so stuff that was only read by other people who were already within that interest group and that field. So yeah, I'll keep it around, and maybe in however many years I'm gonna reread it if I find something that's a good introduction to that topic in a literary sense. Next up, this is probably going to be one of the last times I mention that book for a while. It's been in most of my videos this year. The tabs should tell you how much I like this. This is one of my all-time favorite books, Eyes by Anna Kavan. Man, this book, it's really unlike anything else I've ever read. Where do I start? If you haven't seen my other videos, I'll give you a brief explanation. So basically, the plot, you have this unnamed male protagonist and this this girl or young woman. You don't really know how old she is. She might be a teenager, she might be a young adult. There's this apocalyptic catastrophe going on where everything turns into ice, and the ice is spreading from the polar caps, and it's kind of a dystopian scenario. And this man is obsessed with this girl, and he wants to. Well, it's a bit ambiguous what he really wants to do. If she's of sexual interest to him, or if he wants to be kind of her guardian, or it's very, you never really know what is really going on because it changes. There's this other character called the Warden, who well, I don't want to spoil too much, but it's never really fully disclosed if he's actually a separate character. He might just be another side of the personality of the narrator, and he even questions that himself sometimes. He's like, oh, we are so alike, we seem like the same person, and that kind of stuff. And he definitely is like really devious and really, yeah, he definitely seems like he's a predator. And the main character, like, sometimes the girl is afraid of him, but also sometimes she's not, and sometimes she stands up to him, and it's a very, very ambiguous relationship, and it's definitely super toxic and super dangerous. But it's so well written. To write something that is hard to understand itself is I don't think that's an easy thing to do. So yes, I marked one part here. I marked them all in the same color, which is not very nice if you're trying to find something specific. I can't find the part that I was gonna read, so I'm just gonna read the very first couple sentences. I was lost. It was already dusk. I had been driving for hours and was practically out of petrol. The idea of being stranded in these lonely hills in the dark appalled me, so I was glad to see a signpost and coast down to a garage. When I opened the window to speak to the attendant, the air outside was so cold that I turned up my collar. While he was filling the tank, he commented on the weather. Never known such cold in this month. Forecasts say we are in for a real bad freeze-up. Most of my life was spent abroad, soldiering or exploring remote areas, but though I had just come from the tropics and freeze-ups meant little to me, I was struck by the ominous sound of his words. Anxious to get on, I asked the way to the village I was making for. You'll never find it in the dark. It's right off the beaten track, and those hill roads are dangerous when they're iced up. He seemed to imply that only a fool would drive on under present conditions, which rather annoyed me, so cutting short his involved directions, I paid him and drove away, ignoring his last warning shout, "Look out for that ice." So I think that gives you a pretty good feel of that book. It's, high recommendation. One of the best books I've ever read. Which leads me to, unironically, like I'm being fully serious, to probably the best book that I've ever read in my life. It's Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe himself in this little Reclam edition, which has the number 1, which means this is the very first book that this publisher ever published, which is pretty cool. It's not a first edition, but so it's quite a famous story. You have this Dr. Faustus, and you have Mephisto, who is like Satan, who's the devil, and they kind of make a pact, and basically because Faust just wants to get laid, to put it into simple words. This is something that a lot of German kids read in school. Well, teenagers, when they're like, when you're in like 10th grade, when you're like 16, a lot of people read this. And even though I had German class as one of one of my subjects that I had my finals in, we never really even touched on Goethe, which is a shame. And I've had this on my shelf for a while, but I just really needed to wait for the right time, and I'm God damn, there's construction going on outside. You know, I felt like I needed to wake up and be like, well, today I read Faust. That's like my main focus of the day. I didn't read this in one day, by the way. It's a bit long to read in one day. And it's very, very dense. I actually went out to walk, and I took this with me, and I went to a quiet part of the town, and I even like read while I was walking, and sat down. It was a very nice experience, and the words in this, God, it's a miracle that someone would put words together in this way. It's an absolute, honestly, a work of genius, and I'm so glad I'm so glad I'm capable to speak and understand the German language, because this could never ever, I haven't checked out in translation, but this is impossible to translate and keep that same feeling alive, it all rhymes, it's all in verse, and I just think this would be, you couldn't really keep the verse going, and also have that wonderful sense of words. It's so playful, and it's so, I don't even have the words to describe it, but this instantly made it into my top favorite lists. I'm looking for a nice part to read out to you. I'm gonna read this part. It's in German, but you can still listen to it and appreciate the sounds. Well, I should say, this is like angels talking. And Mephisto shows up later, and they're kind of talking about angel stuff. Die Sonne tönt nach alter Weise in Brudersphären Wettgesang, und ihre vorgeschriebene Reise vollendet sie mit Donnergang. Ihr Anblick gibt den Engeln Stärke, wenn keiner sie ergründen mag. Die unbegreiflich hohen Werke sind herrlich wie am ersten Tag. And so on. I don't want to make this video too long. I could read the whole book to you. This kind of ends in the middle of everything going on, and there's a second part, and I haven't started that yet, and I feel like I should have continued right on, but I just need to get in the mood again. I need to, tap into that Goethe mindset to be able to read the second part and do it full justice, I feel like. So if you're German, definitely read this, and if you're not, read this anyway, because it's, even though I don't think you could transmit that beauty in a translation, it's still gonna be worth reading it. Yes. So, whoa, man, I need to calm down a little bit. Next up, I read Panama Fever, the epic story of the building of the Panama Canal by Matthew Parker. I think this took me more than half a year to read. I think I started this when I just moved here, like in September. And I took a long break. I think I didn't touch this for probably like 2 months or a little bit longer. And this gives you a full, extremely detailed account of the building of the Panama Canal, which, is something that everybody has heard of, but the impact that this had on the world, man, it completely changed economics and trade, and it had such a vast, big influence on the whole world, and it's one of the, it might be, I'm not sure if it's the biggest or one of the biggest building projects in modern times. So and this took like almost 100 years to build, I think. And at the same time as being a very impressive project, it's also like peak colonialism. It's basically a modern example of slavery, like up until in the early 1900s, up until like 1907, 1910, or a little bit longer, they were keeping the workers there basically as slaves. They didn't call it that, but they had the whole segregation going on between whites and, well, everybody who wasn't white American. They didn't even separate anymore. very classist. The whites get paid more, even though they didn't necessarily do their labor wasn't necessarily higher. And they went into that whole like bias thing where they gave the whites nice apartment, nice food, medical care, and the it was mainly people from the West Indies, so the Caribbeans, Black Americans and South Americans. They were kept in little huts with like holes in the roof, and they didn't get any nutritious food. They just got like maniocs and like a little bit of meat. And then they complained that they were doing such bad work after everybody was like malnourished and sleep deprived, and tens of thousands of people died. I'm not sure if it's in the book, but I think it's also the project where the most people died while building it. And it's so sickening how this like French dude just in a press announcement he says he estimates the death toll at 50,000, which how can you say that in front of like an audience? I expect 50,000 people to die. And at the same time, I think for a lot of people this was like the symbol of the American dream, because the French started building it and they failed basically, and then the Americans took over. So definitely a super, super interesting part of history. There's also a book where it talks about the native history, written by someone who lived at the time, I'm not sure, or who is of descent, but that book has been long out of print and is basically impossible to find, but I would definitely be interested in reading another perspective. This is going to be a long video, but very dense, extremely detailed account. This must have taken years of research, which is very impressive. If you like Erik Larson's writing, then you're probably also gonna like this. Not a lot of translated books this month, I'm realizing. The only book that I didn't read in the original language was the Murakami one. We have The Wall by Marlen Haushofer, which this book I heard about from Leaf by Leaf, that YouTube channel. And so basically there's a woman in the Alps, in the mountains, high up. And she wakes up one morning and she's all by herself, and then she realizes there's like an invisible wall around her property, and you cannot protrude it. It seems to her like everybody outside that wall, every human and every animal has died, and she does not know what's going on. And her approach to that is what makes this book really interesting, I think, because she never tries to really find out what happened. Also, that wouldn't really be possible, but she never really explores how far the wall reaches. She never tries to escape. She just kind of lives her life, And that I find, it took me finishing this book and now talking about it to realize how much I appreciate it, because you would think you have like a survival story, where you like seeing the how far you can reach, where you can go, and she just kind of stays at home, and she has a bunch of animals, some cats, some cows, a dog, and I will say this was a bit of a stretch at times. Like for this amount of pages, it's not that long, but it's like about 260 pages. Not a lot of things happened. It was very much written in a stream of consciousness style, where it didn't really go in chronological order. She was kind of looking back and jumping back and forth, but you could still really understand what's going on. And a lot of animals. I never really read books about animals, so definitely an interesting thing. Also, this was written in the 60s. I thought this was quite a bit more recent, but if you're interested in German-speaking writers, I think she was Austrian, but she wrote in German from that time period, and especially women who, there's mainly not only in German literature, but world literature, especially in that time period, there's not a lot of women that are known, and this is someone worth checking out. Next up, my reread for this month was The Golem by Gustav Meyrink. I read this like 4 years ago or something, quite a while ago. And even though this is a very nice looking book, I didn't really like it that much. I remember, I don't want to spoil the ending, but the first time I read it, I really hated the ending, and I felt like it ruined the whole book. This time around, I was thinking quite differently. This time I actually kind of liked the ending. And also, this guy was also one of these Germans living in Prague. And, and he was... This was written in 1915, I think. So also at the same time as Kafka, and you really see how that's like a scene that... I don't think they ever really had a name, but a lot of... It's definitely a style. It's definitely a genre of literature, I would say. Because they all have like some really similar elements in their books. And yeah, this is about basically the Jews living in Prague, the Jewish scene, and this creature called the Golem. You know, it's like in fantasy. I think there's a Pokemon called Golem, and but it... Oh, I found my tabs that I was missing. Nice. And it all originated kind of in like Czech Republic of Prague, in the Jewish mysticism. So definitely like a cool book, but not really quite my cup of tea. But it's by no means a bad book at all. I was considering making this into its own video, this book, because this is gonna get quite long. It's probably gonna be like a 45-minute video, but that's fine. So, The Ship of Magic. Actually, you know what? I'll talk about this first. I read The Stranger by Albert Camus. I'm not gonna talk about this very much. I reread this. Last year I read the English version. This year I read the German version. And I would say that I like the German version a lot more. I could definitely... I feel like I just got like a deeper understanding of it. Which makes sense because it's my mother tongue, you know? But yeah, nice edition. This is probably a book that most people will know, so I'll just focus talking about this. So I'm really in the mindset of reading a lot of long books this year, and I wanted to kind of challenge myself to read like an epic fantasy book, because that's something that I read as a teenager, but I completely stopped reading. And you know, I was kind of, let's be honest, I was kind of like looking down on fantasy, and I saw it as something of less value, not really less value, but just something that I wasn't really interested in reading, because I always felt like for most literary fiction, it's like based in reality, and there's something for me to learn, you know. Even this, where it was written in Algeria, there's like something that is tied to the real world that I can take away from this book and kind of add to my personal knowledge and wisdom and that kind of stuff. And I felt that it doesn't really work that way with fantasy. So I kind of, yeah, I never really consumed much fantasy in my adult life. As a teenager, I only read fantasy basically. But yeah, it's just something that I kind of stopped doing. But this book, man, it is so well written. It kind of made me remember why people like fantasy, you know? And why I used to like fantasy. And I also realized what you can take away from it, because maybe you can take away anything from the real world, but this is definitely a masterclass on how to write characters, how to pace a story, how to like build tension and that kind of stuff. It's really completely, you know, I get the appeal. And while a book like this, you know, it's like a lot of people make the comparison to like a good wine or something like that, this is like a full course meal, you know, like appetizer, dessert, drinks, everything is in there, you know. It's saturated with kind of everything that you could ask for. It's got tension, it's got action scenes, it got family drama, it has a little bit of romance sprinkled in, so you know, it's like the full experience. And well, I actually heard about this book many years ago, and I think probably like 6 years ago, and I always kind of thought the concept sounded interesting. You have these life ships, which are ships that are alive, that come alive in this really, you know, the magic in this world is really subtle. It's kind of like enchanting or something, and if three members of the same family tied by blood die on the ship, then the ship becomes alive and it becomes like way better than all the other ships, and it also can talk. And I kind of explained it in a stupid way, but it's a really cool concept. And man, you know, like some of the scenes, you have like two main antagonists. Let me start again. Well, there's two main characters. One of them is Althea, and the other one is Wintro, who I would say are the main characters. Althea is kind of this young woman who lived on that ship all her life, and it never came alive yet. It only comes alive in the very beginning of the book. And then Kyle, the antagonist, kind of, who's her in-law, he's like, what do you call it in English? The husband of her sister. He kind of hates her, and he kicks her off the ship, and he wants to force his really young son, Wintro, who's like 13 or something, to work on the ship. And he wants to be a priest, and he doesn't want to be on the ship at all. And he kind of creates this whole drama where he's, you know, he's a very well-written antagonist, because I just hated him so much. I was really like, in some scenes I had such a physical reaction. I was like genuinely shaking, and I was even sweating a little bit because it was so tense. And then I looked up the wiki for this series, and I spoiled myself, which I do not regret doing, but I couldn't take it. It was too tense for me. And yeah, and he's so oppressive. He wants to he was not. I think my favorite character was the other antagonist, the pirate captain Kenneth. But even that main antagonist Kyle, he was, you know, he was quite well written, I would say, because he was really oppressive and evil and cruel, and he had no empathy for anyone and no respect for anyone. But then you had these moments where he was also kind of like just a father, you know, and just kind of wants to help also. So yeah, man, the characters, I didn't like all the characters. I think Althea, the main character, she was cool, but she didn't really have a lot of depth. But Wintro was also such, yeah, man, it's such well-written characters. And that's really, for me, the takeaway of this book is how to write really real and complex characters, how to even coming up with a story that's this long. This is just the first part of a trilogy. To even like pace that kind of stuff, and how, you know, have that kind of not cliffhangers, but to have like something happen and then you kind of can piece together what's gonna happen next. It's yeah, it was a really well written book, and I was really glad to read something like this. Am I gonna read more fantasy? Probably not. But if I ever come across the second part or the third part of this trilogy for, like, you know, in like a free box or like at a €1 kind of deal, I'm probably gonna pick it up. I'm not gonna go out of my way to get it, but definitely for all these litfic people out here, you know, all these intellectuals, I really recommend to pick something up like this. It's a very enriching experience. So yeah, I'll see. I'll probably talk for like 40 minutes or something, but yes, that was it for this month. I'm probably gonna read way less next month because my classes start again. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. Love you all and see you next time.